A routine hallway transition between classes has ignited a massive legal, political, and community firestorm.
It really has. I mean, it's totally consumed the community.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are so thrilled you're joining us today because we are unpacking an incredibly complex, multi-layered case out of Fairfax, Virginia.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
It is. We're examining the massive fallout surrounding an 18-year-old high school student who was arrested for repeatedly groping classmates.
And our source stack today is dense. I mean, really dense.
Oh, yeah.
We're pulling together local and national news reports, the actual specific text of Virginia state laws, some legal analysis blogs, and
YouTube transcripts, right, from the community meetup.
Exactly. YouTube transcripts, plus the very fierce debates happening right now on platforms like Reddit.
So our mission today is really to cut straight through all that intense, emotional, and quite frankly, political noise surrounding this case.
Right.
We want to look closely at the actual facts of the incidents, explore the very strict and often conflicting legal mandates that schools have to follow when a crime occurs on campus.
Which is a whole mess on its own.
Totally. And finally, we're going to examine the broader collision between local sanctuary policies and federal immigration enforcement.
Which is really the crux of why this matters to anyone listening, regardless of where you live.
Right.
This case demonstrates how a highly localized school incident can just boom, instantly act as a proxy for massive national debates.
He's crazy.
We are looking at a perfect storm where criminal law, education policy, and federal immigration rules all violently intersect.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we get into the heavy politics and all the complex legal mechanisms, we have to establish the physical reality of what happened.
Yeah, the actual events inside Fairfax High School that sparked this absolute outrage.
Right. So the suspect in question is Israel Flores Ortiz. He's an 18-year-old enrolled as a junior at the high school. And on March 7th, local authorities arrested him and charged him with 9 distinct counts of assault and battery.
9 counts. And to understand how this happened repeatedly, without him getting caught right away, we have to look at the environment.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because the accusations state that Ortiz allegedly sneaked up behind approximately a dozen female students.
Who were complete strangers to him, by the way.
Right, complete strangers. And the reports indicate he groped them between the legs. And this was not a one-time event.
No, not at all.
Parents are asserting this behavior occurred over a period of several months, though I guess the police officially list the primary offense date as February 25th.
Yeah. And the physical environment of the crime is really what allowed it to continue.
Right, the hallways.
Exactly. A high school hallway during a class change is a uniquely chaotic space.
It's like a stock exchange floor.
That is a perfect analogy.
I mean, you've got hundreds of kids moving in every direction, lockers slamming, people shouting. It's just a totally bustling, chaotic few minutes.
Yeah, you have high noise levels and a very short window of time before the bell rings. It provides an incredible amount of cover for someone to commit a physical violation and then just immediately vanish into a dense crowd of backpacks and moving students.
But 9 counts of assault and battery. When I look at those specific charges, it strikes me as a profound mismatch.
Well, so?
Well, the law seems to be treating a severe sexual boundary violation as a Class 1 misdemeanor.
Right.
That essentially puts this systemic groping into the exact same legal bucket as, like, a teenager throwing a punch in the cafeteria over a stolen lunch.
Yeah, and you are hitting on the exact source of the parents' frustration here.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Under Virginia Code, specifically Section 18.2-57, assault and battery is a Class 1 misdemeanor.
Okay.
It carries a maximum penalty of up to 1 year in jail per charge. But parents are aggressively arguing that these acts should have been charged as sexual assault.
So why didn't they? Why does the system default to the lesser charge? Is it just prosecutor laziness, or is there a structural reason they go for assault and battery instead?
It's not laziness. It generally comes down to the mechanics of the law and the burden of proof.
Okay, explain that.
So sexual battery in many jurisdictions requires proving specific intent, or showing that the act was committed against the explicit will of the victim, which often implies a level of force, threat, or intimidation.
Right.
In a 2-second hallway pass, where the victim is grabbed from behind in a chaotic crowd.
Like the stock exchange floor.
Exactly. Proving that specific legal threshold beyond a reasonable doubt becomes incredibly difficult.
I see.
Simple assault and battery, on the other hand, just requires proving unwanted, unauthorized touching. It's a much faster, more secure conviction for a prosecutor.
But from the parents' perspective, I mean, that legal pragmatism feels like a massive betrayal.
Oh, absolutely.
A misdemeanor assault charge sounds like the legal system is totally minimizing the sexual trauma their daughters experienced. They feel like the potential punishment fundamentally fails to match the severity of the violation.
And because that sanitized, minimized language started in the legal charges, it bled directly into how the school handled the situation.
Right, which was a disaster.
Total disaster.
Yeah.
This creates our first major institutional conflict. The school's response versus their legal obligations.
Let's look at that response. On March 12th, the principal of Fairfax High School, Georgina I., sent a formal letter to the school community.
Right.
And she described the incidents as a student, and I'm quoting here, touching students' buttocks while they were transitioning.
Yeah. And that specific phrasing caused an absolute explosion of community anger.
I can imagine.
Parents immediately claimed the school was intentionally downplaying the severity of the groping to, protect the school's reputation.
Right.
One mother pointed out to a news outlet that Ortiz allegedly put his hand between the girl's legs, and the buttocks were actually the last thing he touched.
Wow. And there were severe real-world consequences for that softened language, too.
Yeah, for the victims?
Exactly. Because the principal's letter made it sound like a minor, almost accidental hallway bump, the actual victims faced severe bullying and harassment from their own peers.
It's awful.
Other students read that letter and started accusing the victims of just being attention-seeking. The school's attempt to manage the PR totally backfired and actively harmed the victims.
And it gets worse. The district reportedly told parents that if Ortiz was released from custody, he could potentially return to the school.
You're joking.
No. And when parents demanded answers for why the letter was so vague and why the suspect might be allowed back, the Fairfax County Public Schools District basically cited federal and state privacy laws.
Oh, come on.
They claimed their hands were tied, and they simply could not comment further on specific student disciplinary cases.
Wait, I struggle to buy the privacy excuse here. Let's look at the actual rules, because Virginia law section 22.1-279.3.1 dictates mandatory reporting protocols for schools.
Right.
It explicitly states that principals must report incidents of sexual assault and student arrests to the superintendent and to local law enforcement.
Yes, it does.
It also mandates they immediately report criminal offenses to the parents of any minor student who is this specific object of the act. So if the state law requires reporting the incident to parents, does the school's highly sanitized phrasing, the touching buttocks line, violate the spirit of transparency that the law intended? Or are they just shielding themselves from liability?
Well, what's fascinating here is the incredibly difficult tightrope school administrators have to walk.
Okay.
On one side, you have the state mandatory reporting laws you just mentioned.
Right.
But on the other side, schools are strictly bound by FERPA.
That's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act.
Exactly. It's a massive federal law that protects the privacy of student education records, which explicitly includes disciplinary actions.
And if a school violates FERPA, they risk losing their federal funding, right?
Right. Which is basically a financial death sentence for a public school district.
Wow.
So even though Ortiz is 18 and legally an adult in the criminal justice system, he is still an enrolled high school student.
Meaning he's shielded by FERPA.
Precisely. So administrators try to craft this legally vetted message that informs the community that a general threat has been handled without violating the federal privacy rights of the accused.
Or sharing graphic details that could trigger a lawsuit.
Exactly.
But in doing so, they managed to alienate the victims, enrage the parents, and create a narrative that they were covering up a serious crime to avoid community panic.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates how strict legal compliance does not always equal effective or, frankly, moral community leadership.
Right. And because the school's sanitized language left parents feeling like the threat was minimized and swept under the rug, all of that demand for accountability funneled directly into the courtroom.
Which brings us to March 13th, the bail hearing. If you are a parent listening to this, this is the exact moment where the justice system either works for you or completely fails you.
Truly.
Because usually, we picture prosecutors fighting to keep a suspect locked up, while judges act as the neutral arbiters who might grant leniency.
Imagine finding out your electric bill.
That's the typical
is
dynamic.
secretly
Well, we
funding
saw
the
the
government's
exact
massive
opposite
spending
happening here.
addiction.
We did.
It is a pretty
Ortiz
shocking
appeared
realization
before
when you
Judge
actually look at
Dipty
the
Pitty
math.
Keedy
Right.
Smith, Well, imagine for
Fairfax
a second
County
that you have a
Commonwealth's
savings account.
Attorney's Office,
And
led by Steve Descano,
you
had
swore to your
apparently
family,
approved
hand
the
over
bail
heart,
amount sought by the
that
defense.
this money was
Wait,
strictly for
The
fixing a leaking
prosecutor's
roof.
office was fully
You
willing
said,
to let
"If
Ortiz
we
walk
don't
out of
fix this
jail while
roof,
he awaited his
the
trial.
house is going to
Why
collapse."
on earth
It's
would a
an
prosecutor
existential
agree to
crisis for the
release
house.
someone
Exactly.
facing
It's the
9
save the
counts
house
of
fund.
groping students
But
in
then,
a public
your
school?
car breaks down.
It comes back to the
Spend a little too much on
mechanisms of
groceries,
the
you've
legal
got bills
system we
piling
discussed
up.
earlier.
So what do?
misdemeanor thing.
You raid the roof fund.
Exactly.
You take
Because
that
the
money,
charges
pay off
were
your credit
filed as
cards, and
Class
tell your
1
family, hey,
misdemeanors,
don't worry, we'll fix
they
the
fall
roof
into a
later.
standard bail matrix.
Oh,
And
a
in this
point
scenario,
system.
the roof is the planet.
Many
Or at
jurisdictions,
least Maryland's climate
especially
goals,
those implementing
and the
bail
car is a
reform
massive
policies,
self-inflicted
use a point system to determine pretrial release.
$1.5 state budget
If the
deficit.
charge
A
is a
completely
nonviolent
avoidable
misdemeanor,
deficit, I
legally
might add.
speaking, welcome
and
to
the
the deep
suspect
dive.
doesn't have an extensive
Today we're
prior
exploring
criminal
a classic
record,
case
the
of
Matrix
fiscal
often
sleight of
recommends
hand
release
coming out
on
of
recognizance
Annapolis.
or
We are
low
looking at
cash
the
bail.
Strategic
To prevent
Energy
jail
Investment Fund.
overcrowding.
Right, the SAFE.
The
prosecutor's office was likely
It's a
just
huge
following
pot
the
of
standard
money
matrix
meant to save
for
the
a misdemeanor
environment.
assault.
But it's
But
turning
Judge
into a hidden
Pitty
tax
Smith
on every
refused
single
to just
person
rubber
paying an
stamp that
electric bill
matrix.
in
She
Maryland.
did.
The
It really
judge
is. It's
actually
become the
reviewed
center
the
of a
surveillance
huge
footage
political fight.
of the incidents
You've
from the
got
school
a Democratic
hallways.
governor,
Wow.
frustrated
And after watching the
environmentalists
visual
making some
evidence
very
of how the
awkward
suspect
compromises,
operated in that crowded
and conservative
environment,
critics
she
who
made
are
a
rightly
definitive
calling this
ruling.
whole thing
She
a
denied
shell
bail.
game.
She denied
game.
bail for Ortiz
And
entirely.
when you look at the
She
documents we have
explicitly
today,
stated on the record
reports,
that the proposed
budget
release
proposals,
conditions would
critiques
not
from Senate
adequately
Republicans,
protect the public.
it is
That
really
dynamic
hard
is
to
absolutely
unsee it.
fascinating.
Our mission for
It
this deep
really
dive is
highlights
simple.
the
Follow the
profound
money.
power of
Always
visual
follow the
evidence.
money. It really
We are
does.
going to see
I mean,
how
the
a
prosecutor
fund
looked at a piece of
designed to
paper,
fight climate change
saw the words
is being used to plug
misdemeanor
holes
assault,
in the state budget.
applied a standard
And we'll dig into the
formula,
argument that this
and
isn't
saw
found
a
money at
routine
all.
case for
This is
bail.
essentially
Right.
a backdoor
But
tax
the judge
on families.
watched the video,
Let's get right into
saw a
it.
predator
The
operating
Strategic
in a
Energy
crowded
Investment
school
Fund.
hallway,
It sounds very official,
and saw an
very
immediate
important.
direct threat
What does
to
it
public
actually do?
safety.
Well,
She
on
totally
paper,
overruled
it is
the
the state's
prosecutor's leniency.
green piggy
It is
bank.
a striking
The
moment.
SIF is managed
You
by
see the
the
judicial
Maryland
branch
Energy
stepping in to
Administration.
establish
Its whole
a
stated
boundary
purpose is
when they
to
feel the
reduce energy
prosecutorial
bills,
branch is
cut
acting with
waste,
too
and
much
fund
administrative
renewable
detachment.
energy.
Like solar
By
panels and
denying
efficiency
bail, the
upgrades.
judge ensured
Exactly.
Ortiz
But here
remained
is the
in
real
local
aha
custody.
moment.
of
And
the
keeping him
story.
in a jail cell is the exact
Where does the
mechanism
money
that triggered the
actually
most explosive
come
layer
from?
of this entire
Because they aren't
case.
just
Yes, this
taxing
is where it
you
goes
directly
national.
for
The
it.
moment he was
No,
held,
and that's why
this
politicians
local crime
absolutely love
story
it. It feels
instantly
free.
transformed
So about
into a
40%
fierce
comes from regional
nationwide
carbon
debate on
auctions.
immigration policy.
But the
Right.
big chunk,
Because
the one
Ortiz is an
growing like crazy,
undocumented immigrant
comes with
from El
something called
Salvador.
alternative
He entered
compliance
the United
payments,
States in 2024
or
and was
ACPs,
released into
which
the
is just a
country under
fancy
federal
government term for a
policy.
fine. And because he was
Right.
actively
It's a
sitting in
fine
local
for failure.
custody,
Let me break it
U.S.
down.
Immigration and
Maryland
Customs
law
Enforcement
forces utility
ICE was
companies to
flagged.
buy a
They
certain amount of
immediately
green
issued what
energy.
is called
They
a
have to prove they're
detainer
using
request
renewables.
to the local
But if they
jail.
can't find that green
Let's
energy,
define
or if
exactly
it's
how
just
that
way too
mechanism
expensive on the
works.
market.
Okay, which it
An
usually is.
ICE
Yeah, the
detainer
state
is
gives them an
basically a
escape
formal
hatch.
request from the
The
federal
utility
government
can just pay a fee
asking the
directly
local
to the
county
state
jail
instead.
to
That
hold
fee
on
is
to a
the
suspect
ACP.
for an extra
And here's
48
the
hours
kicker.
after their local release
Utilities
date.
are
Or at least
increasingly
notify
just
federal
paying the
agents
fine
before they
because
let
it's
the
cheaper
person
than
go.
actually
Right,
buying
which gives
the green
ICE
energy.
time to send agents
the climate fund
pick
is
the
getting
suspect up
incredibly
and begin
rich.
deportation proceedings.
But the Fairfax County Sheriff's
because
Office
the green
refused
energy
to honor
mandates are
that
failing.
ICE detainer.
Precisely.
They
It is
did.
a completely
They cited their local
perverse
sanctuary
incentive.
policies, which
The government
strictly
made the
limit
mandates
local
so
law
aggressive
enforcement
and the market is so
cooperation with
distorted
federal
that
immigration
power
agencies.
companies are just
Yep.
writing checks to
But
the
how
state
does a
instead of going
local
green.
sheriff
And the stats
legally
on this are
possess
just
the power
staggering.
to just
They
tell
are.
a federal agency
In
no?
2022,
Does
this revenue
federal
was
law
$77
supersede
million.
local policy?
Well, think
By
of an ICE
2025, it
detainer
jumped
in
to
a sanctuary jurisdiction like two
$365
massive
million.
gears with stripped
Wow.
teeth.
From 77
The federal
million
government
to
sends the signal to
365
hold the
million in
suspect.
3 years.
Right, so
But
now the
local
state has
policy
this
removes the
massive
enforcement teeth,
accidental
so the
pot
gears
of
just
gold.
slip
It's
past each
supposedly
other.
for green
The legal
projects.
backing for this
But remember,
comes
that
from the
money
10th
didn't just
Amendment
fall out
of
of
the
the
U.S.
sky. The
Constitution,
utility companies
specifically
paid those
the
fines.
anti-commandeering
And do you think
doctrine.
those massive
Anti-commandeering.
corporations
Right.
just eat
The Supreme Court has ruled that the federal government
Oh,
cannot
absolutely not.
force
They
state
pass
or local
every single
officials
penny of that
to
onto the
use their
customer.
own
Exactly.
local
It shows up
resources
right
to
on your electric
enforce
bill.
federal
So you,
laws.
the everyday ratepayer,
Therefore,
are
honoring
paying
an
for the
ICE
utilities'
detainer
failure
is
to meet a
technically
government
voluntary
mandate.
for a local
The
jail.
state collects your money,
Fairfax County
drops it in
simply
the safe, and
exercised its
says,
right to
look at all
decline
this
the
cash we
request.
have for the
And
climate.
the political
Which
fallout
brings
from
us to
that
the
was
raid.
Immediate and
Because that
brutal.
money is definitely
absolutely
not
brutal.
staying in the
ICE
climate fund.
publicly
Not
released
anymore.
a
Enter Governor
scathing
Wes
statement
Moore.
blaming
His
sanctuary
administration is
politicians,
staring down a
specifically
projected
calling out Virginia
$1.5
Governor
billion
Abigail
budget
Spanberger by
deficit.
name.
Yeah, they didn't hold back.
$1.5 billion.
They argued that these local
can't just
policies
ignore a hole
outlaw
that deep.
basic
You can't.
cooperation
And
and
when
essentially
government
force
overspends
local
to
jails
that
to
degree,
release
they
criminal
start
suspects
checking
back
under
into
the
the
couch
communities they
cushions
just
for loose
victimized.
change.
And you see this argument
Except
heavily
here, the couch
reflected
cushion
across
is the green
conservative
energy
news
fund,
sources
and the loose change
among
is
many
hundreds of millions
frustrated
of
parents in
taxpayer dollars.
Fairfax.
So what's
Their
the
core Their argument is a matter of prioritization.
The governor's plan
Conservative
diverts
voices are arguing that
$292
sanctuary
million
policies
directly from the
actively
SAFE into the state's
prioritize
general fund,
shielding
balance the
adult
books.
undocumented
just to cover their
immigrants
overspending.
from
They
deportation
are using
over
energy
ensuring the
fines to pay
basic physical
for
safety of
general
children in
government
public
operations.
schools.
Yeah, they view
Bureaucracy,
the sheriff's
salaries,
refusal
office
to honor
supplies,
the
you name
detainer.
it, especially
that's not
given the
even all
nature
of
of the
it.
crimes.
I read in the
as a
sources there's
massive
also a
betrayal
rebate
of the
scheme.
public trust.
Yes.
But
This is the
when
part
we
critics are
analyze the
calling a
community
political
discussions,
sweetener. They're
specifically
grabbing
the
another
intense debates
$100
happening on
million
platforms like Reddit,
out of the fund
we
to
see a
give a
very strong
one-time
counter-perspective
$40
pushing back
rebate to
against that
eligible
narrative.
households.
Right, because there's always another
$40.
side to the
Earbucks.
debate.
So let me get
Exactly.
this straight.
Many
The
community
state
members argue
mandates
that
drive up
Ortiz's
energy
immigration
costs.
status is
The
completely
utility
irrelevant
companies
to the
pass
crime
those
itself.
massive
Okay.
costs
Their
to
point
you
is
and
that a
me.
native born
Our
American
bills
citizen
go up by
could
hundreds
just
of
as
dollars
easily
a
commit
year.
assault in a high school
And then the
hallway.
governor
So
takes
they
a
are
chunk of our
warning
own
against
money,
using this
hands us
single,
back a
highly
crisp
emotional case
$40
to fuel
bill,
broader
and basically
xenophobia or
says,
fear
"You're
mongering
welcome."
against
That
all
is the
immigrants.
exact
Yes.
math.
It's
From this
wild. And if you look at the
perspective,
recent
the
supplemental
community's
budget,
focus
they're
should remain
cutting or
strictly
shifting
on
another $80
ensuring
million.
due
When you add
process,
all this up,
conducting
this
a
rate
fair trial
depletes
for
the
the
fund by
criminal acts committed,
82%.
82%
and not
of the
turning
fund
an
wiped out.
18-year-old
Wiped out.
suspect
Yeah.
into
Leaving
a
only
political
about
pawn for a
$164
national
million
border
for the
debate.
actual
So what does
green
this all
initiatives it
mean?
was
We have this
legally meant
incredible
for.
friction
That is not a
between
trim.
federal immigration
That's a total
enforcement
gutting.
and local jurisdiction
And this is where the
rules.
politics gets
regardless
super
of the fierce
interesting, because
political
you would
debate
assume the
happening outside the
environmentalist
courthouse,
groups
there
like
are
the
very
Sierra
hard
Club
legal
or the
realities
Chesapeake
waiting
Climate
for
Action
Ortiz
Network
inside the courtroom.
you'd assume they'd be
regarding
furious.
his immigration
They
status.
were.
Right.
Initially,
connect this local
when
incident
this
back to the
first
bigger
leaked, they
picture
called
of
it
federal immigration
unacceptable.
law,
They said it
our
was a
source
huge
from the
mistake
Nova
to
Legal
use
Group
this money as
outlines
a
the
petty
stakes very
cash
clearly.
drawer.
But then
criminal
they folded.
conviction
They completely
has a massive,
folded.
often
Now they are
irreversible
actually
impact on a
supporting
person's
parts of the
ability to
governor's
remain in the
spending
United
plan.
States.
Even for
Talk
a
about
class 1
strange
misdemeanor,
bedfellows.
we talked earlier
Why
about
on earth
how
would they
a
do
misdemeanor
that?
is often
If they
viewed
truly
as a
believe climate
low-level
change is an
offense.
existential
Does the federal
crisis,
government actually
why
deport
let the
people
state
over
raid the
misdemeanors?
survival
They
fund?
absolutely do.
It's just
And this
raw
is where we need
political
to introduce a
calculation. They
crucial
know
piece of
voters are
legal
getting crushed
terminology.
by inflation and
A
high
crime
energy
of
bills
moral
right now.
turpitude,
If
often
these
abbreviated
green
as a
groups attack a
CIMT.
$40
Moral
rebate,
turpitude.
even if it's a total
That sounds
gimmick,
archaic.
It
they
is
look
one of
like
those
they don't
strange,
care about
archaic
working
legal
families.
phrases.
So they have to play
in
the game.
immigration
They
law,
are
it
swallowing
carries
a
massive
very
weight.
bitter pill.
It basically
In exchange
defines
for
an
letting
act
the
that is
governor
inherently
raid the
base,
fund today,
vile, or
they
depraved,
are lobbying for a
contrary
new
to the
law to
accepted
create a
rules of
funding
morality
floor in
in
the
society.
future.
Okay,
Meaning
so
what
while
exactly?
a simple
Meaning
assault,
they want to
like
guarantee
getting into a
that the
shoving
state
match
will
over a
mandate
parking spot might
roughly
not be a crime of moral
$365 million a year on
repeatedly
climate
groping
spending
teenage
moving
girls
forward.
between
So they
the
are
legs
throwing today's
almost certainly
taxpayers
crosses
under the
that legal
bus
threshold.
to lock in a
Precisely.
permanent claim on
While
your wallet
major
later.
crimes like
That's the
aggravated
gamble.
felonies
And it brings us
almost
right to
guarantee
the
immediate
core conservative
deportation.
critique.
Even seemingly
People like
minor
Senate Minority
offenses
Leader
or
Steve Hershey
misdemeanors
aren't
can trigger the
buying this
exact same
spin at
outcome if
all.
they
Not
involve
for a
violence
second.
or
Let's
moral
walk through their
turpitude.
argument
Wow.
because it
A
really
conviction on these
exposes the
charges
math
could
here.
render
They
Ortiz
call it the hidden
permanently
tax.
inadmissible to stay
Let's
in the
be
United
rigorous
States.
about
So
this
while the
logic.
local
Step
jurisdictions
1,
and federal
the state
agencies are
forces
currently
a green
clashing
mandate
over the
that is
immediate
totally
detainer,
disconnected
ultimately
from
the
economic
legal outcome
reality.
of these
Step
9
2,
misdemeanor
the
charges
utilities
will
can't
likely
meet it,
dictate
so they pay the
Ortiz's
massive
future in the
fine.
country.
Step
If
3,
the local prosecutor
utilities raise
secures
your
a
electric
conviction,
rates to cover the
the
fine.
federal
And
government
step
gains
4,
a much
the state grabs
stronger,
that fine money
undeniable
to pay
legal
for
mechanism
general
to
government
remove him.
bloat.
Exactly.
Regardless
So,
of
in
whether
effect, the
Fairfax
state
County
is taxing
operates as a
electricity
sanctuary
users to pay for the
jurisdiction or not.
DMV or
Exactly.
state
The
salaries
local criminal
without
court
ever
process
having to
has
publicly
to
vote
play
on
out
a
first.
tax hike.
Hershey says
the
the
Maryland
stakes of
families
that
are being
upcoming
double-billed.
trial
You pay
are
your regular
incredibly
income
high.
taxes,
Right.
It is
and then
not
you
just
pay
about
this
his
massive
immediate
surcharge
freedom
on
or
your
a
electric
potential
bill.
one-year jail
It's
sentence.
incredibly
It's
sneaky.
fundamentally
politically
about his
convenient.
legal ability to
And
remain
there
in
is
the
a
country.
second layer to
Let's
this
bring
criticism,
all these
the sheer
complex threads
hypocrisy
together.
of it
Yeah, there's a
all.
lot
This
here.
is the
This
most
deep dive took
glaring
us
part.
through multiple
Politicians
intersecting
constantly
layers
tell
of a
us
highly
climate
charged
change is
issue.
an existential
We
threat.
started with
They
the
say the
physical
world is
reality
burning.
of a crowded school
Code
hallway,
red for
analyzing how the
humanity.
chaotic
We have
environment
zero
provided cover for
time
a
to
suspect
waste.
to
So
repeatedly
critics are asking
victimize
a very
students.
simple,
We then
very
explore the
devastating
strict often contradictory legal mandates governing school administrators.
Right.
Why is the
We
climate
saw how
fund
a school's
the very
attempt to
first thing
navigate
you
federal
raid
FERPA
when you
privacy
overspend your
laws and
budget?
state
You
reporting
don't raid
mandates
your life-saving
resulted
surgery
in
fund to pay off
minimized,
your credit card.
sanitized language
Exactly. The
that
critics
ultimately
argue
caused the
this
victims
proves
to
the whole
suffer
climate
secondary
panic is just
harassment from their
rhetoric.
peers.
When
Which is
push
just
comes to
heartbreaking.
shove, keeping the
And then we
government
looked at the
bureaucracy
surprising
fully
dynamics
funded
of the bail
is
hearing,
way more important
diving
to them
into how
than
a
the green
judge
projects they
utilized
claim are
visual
vital for our
surveillance
survival.
evidence
They treat
to
the fund
override
like
a
a slush
prosecutor
fund,
who was
and it
entirely
following a
undermines their
standard moral
misdemeanor
authority.
bail matrix.
If the money
Yeah.
isn't sacred,
And finally,
then the
we
crisis
unpacked the
clearly isn't
intense
as urgent
political
as they claim on
clash
cable
over
news.
ICE
Let's talk about the
detainers,
real-world
the 10th Amendment
consequences of
protections
this.
behind
Because
sanctuary policies,
while
and
politicians
how
are
the
moving
concept
hundreds
of
of
moral
millions around on
turpitude connects
spreadsheets,
local misdemeanor
it affects the
conviction
actual
to
grid.
federal
What
deportation.
gets left behind when
It is
you
a
drain
single case
82%
that manages
of the
to
fund?
touch on
Well,
almost
programs
every
for electric
major
heat pumps
structural
for
nerve in our
low-income
society
households
right
get
now.
slashed.
Education,
And
justice,
a heat pump actually lowers a bill for
borders,
maybe it's all there. 15
It
to
really
20
is.
years.
And I want to
Right.
leave you with a
Instead,
final
they're
lingering thought to
sacrificing
ponder
long-term
as we wrap up
infrastructure for a
today's analysis.
$40
When a
political
school
handout
attempts to protect
that
a
might
student's
cover your
privacy by
groceries for
softening
2
the details
days.
of a crime.
They're also cutting
And that
electric
decision
school buses,
inadvertently leads
induction
to the actual
stoves,
victims
solar
being
projects.
bullied.
But here's the ultimate
Where
reality
exactly should a
check.
community draw
Even
the line
before this
between
rate,
strict
with all
legal
this
compliance
massive
and basic
spending,
moral
was
transparency?
Maryland
That
actually
is the million-dollar
hitting its
question,
climate
isn't it?
targets?
It really
No.
is.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Thank you
the
so much for
Climate
joining us
Solutions
on
Now
this deep
Act
dive.
demands a
We
60%
really
emissions
appreciate you
reduction
taking
by
the time to
2031.
explore
60%, that's a
facts,
massive target.
mechanisms,
It's
and
huge.
the laws
But a
with us
University of
today.
Maryland
Keep
analysis
asking the
shows
hard
that under
questions,
current
stay
policies,
curious,
the
and we will
state is
catch you on
only
the
going to
next
hit
one.